The ambient temperature of the dry storage room was 72 degrees Fahrenheit. According to standard food safety regulations, it should not exceed 70. I adjusted my posture, noting the slight warp in the wooden shelving units, indicating prolonged humidity exposure. The smell of stale cumin and damp cardboard hung in the air, a clear sign of improper ventilation. I checked my clipboard, making a precise notation with my black pen. This was supposed to be a straightforward turnaround contract for the hospitality group, but the visual discrepancies in this establishment were mounting by the minute. Someone was severely mismanaging the inventory lifecycle. I stepped out of the back exit of the kitchen, intending to locate the owner and present the initial triage report. The heavy metal door clicked shut behind me, cutting off the hum of the failing compressor. The late afternoon sun hit the wooden slats of the back porch, casting long, golden shadows across the weathered boards. That was when I saw her. Elodie Kim was positioned perfectly in the center of the doorway threshold, a severe violation of fire egress codes. She sat in a standard-issue manual wheelchair. A pair of aluminum crutches leaned precariously against the doorframe, practically inviting a tripping hazard. Her left forearm was wrapped in thick, white medical bandaging, securing a splint. She wore dark shorts and a gray tank top, a heavy beige cardigan slipping off one of her shoulders. Her dark hair pulled up into a messy, unstructured ponytail. I stood before her in my standard blue-gray work shirt, the clipboard tight in my grip. She looked up at me, the golden hour light catching the exhausted lines around her eyes, yet she offered a warm, tentative smile that completely defied the operational disaster behind her. "You must be the corporate guy," she said, her voice carrying a soft rasp. "Gregory Nelson." "Correct," I stated, maintaining a neutral tone. "And, as per OSHA regulations, those crutches cannot obstruct a primary exit route." Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second, replaced by a look of sheer bewilderment, before a quiet laugh escaped her. "Good to meet you too. I'm Elodie. Welcome to the Copper Spoon." She gestured vaguely to her cast and the chair. "Pardon the lack of a formal tour. A ladder gave way in the pantry last week. Fractured ankle, sprained wrist. I processed the data. A compromised owner meant a compromised operational flow. I have reviewed the preliminary logistics," I informed her, stepping carefully around the crutches to move them 6 inches to the left, securing them against the siding. "However, there is a logistical error in my contract. The accommodations at the local inn are undergoing asbestos remediation. The management company stipulated I must remain on-site." Elodie pinched the bridge of her nose. "You're kidding. They didn't tell you? Tell me what?" "There is no corporate apartment," she sighed, adjusting the cardigan on her shoulder. "There's just the 2-bedroom flat upstairs, where I live, with my golden retriever, Barnaby, who sheds his body weight weekly, and a sleep schedule that currently revolves around painkillers and panic attacks." She looked up at me, her expression hardening into a stubborn line. "You're a suit who measures the gap between the fridge and the wall. You will never survive living with me." "I am a chef, not a suit," I corrected, tapping my pen against the clipboard. "And according to Section 4, Clause 12 of the restructuring agreement, I am legally bound to reside on the premises to ensure 2 4-hour operational oversight. I require exactly 1 room, a flat surface for a mattress, and a designated shelf in the refrigerator. Your dog shedding can be mitigated with a daily brushing schedule, which I will implement." She stared at me, blinking slowly as the evening breeze rustled the oak trees behind the property. She opened her mouth, closed it, and finally shook her head. The structural decay of the business became apparent by Tuesday. At 0900 hours, City Health and Safety Inspector Vance arrived unannounced. He was a man who enjoyed the leverage of his badge, holding a digital thermometer like a gavel. I observed from the prep station as he cornered Elodie near the dish pit. "The grease trap hasn't been logged in 3 weeks, Miss Kim," Vance noted, his voice carrying over the clatter of pans. "And the hood vent clearance is a 1/4 inch below the safety threshold. With your current injury, I see no way you can rectify this. I'm considering a temporary suspension of your operating license, pending a full structural review." Elodie gripped the wheels of her chair, her knuckles turning white. The panic in her posture was a measurable metric. "Inspector, The repair company is booked out for a month. If you shut us down now, we miss the Harvest Festival crowd. We won't recover. I placed my chef's knife down, wiped my hands on a fresh side towel, and approached the interaction. Inspector Vance, I interjected smoothly, producing a manila folder from the stainless steel counter. Gregory Nelson, I have assumed executive control of the kitchen operations. As per the municipal code, a temporary variance can be granted if a certified external consultant presents a daily mitigation log. I handed him the folder. Here is the revised cleaning schedule, signed and dated. I recalibrated the hood vent tension rods this morning at 0600, bringing it to a clearance of 18.2 inches, which exceeds the minimum requirement. The grease trap was serviced at 0730. Vance reviewed the documents, his expression souring as he found no errors in my formatting. He handed the folder back. I'll be back Friday. If one temperature log is blank, the doors close. He exited. Elodie let out a shaky exhale, the tension dropping from her shoulders. She looked at me, a complicated mixture of relief and resentment in her eyes. You fixed the vent? It required a standard socket wrench and 30 minutes of torque adjustment, I replied, returning to my cutting board. It was inefficient to wait for a contractor. Thank you, she said quietly. It was necessary for the business, I stated, resuming my brunoise of the carrots. Personal gratitude is not required. The domestic proximity proved to be an exercise in extreme environmental contrasting. Elodie's living space upstairs was a chaotic assembly of colorful throw pillows, stacked cookbooks, and vintage plates. My designated room was barren, save for my neatly folded uniforms and a laptop. On Thursday evening, I observed her attempting to manage the restaurant's payroll from the kitchen island. Her sprained wrist made typing a slow, wince-inducing process. The dog, Barnaby, was pacing restlessly, adding auditory clutter to the room. She pushed the laptop away with a frustrated sound. I can't authorize the vendor payments. The system requires dual-factor authentication, and my phone is in the restaurant office downstairs. She reached for her crutches. I intercepted the movement, placing a hand firmly on the back of her wheelchair. Sit, I instructed. Your heart rate is elevated. The structural integrity of your fractured ankle cannot support the stairs right now. I have to pay the suppliers, Gregory, she argued, her voice tight. Or we don't get produce tomorrow. I pulled a blank invoice sheet from my briefcase. You will not use the corporate accounts. As part of my independent assessment, I am authorized to secure vendor continuity. I will write a personal check to cover the morning delivery. She stiffened, her chin lifting. No, absolutely not. I pay my own way. I am not a charity case for the restructuring group, and I am certainly not taking a handout from a consultant. It is not a handout. It is an operational loan, documented and subject to a standard 2% interest rate, payable upon the restaurant's stabilization, I explained calmly, maintaining eye contact. Pride is an unquantifiable variable that ruins profit margins. Allow me to establish the baseline. She stared at me, the fight slowly draining from her posture as she realized I was not pitying her. I was executing a protocol. Fine, she whispered. Draw up the terms. By week 3, the domestic proximity had settled into a quantifiable rhythm, though the environmental variables remained challenging. Elodie's upstairs flat was an ongoing assault on my preference for minimalism, but I adapted by establishing micro-routines. At 0600 hours daily, I calibrated the water temperature for the French press to exactly 200 degrees Fahrenheit. I noted that Elodie's pain medication required ingestion with food to prevent gastric distress. Therefore, before I descended to the restaurant kitchen, I systematically prepared a nutrient-dense breakfast. On Wednesday morning, she navigated her wheelchair to the edge of the kitchen island just as I was plating. Her dark hair was falling out of its loose tie, brushing against her cheek. I observed the slight tremor in her uninjured hand as she reached for her coffee mug. My instinct was to step forward, to secure the loose strands of hair away from her face, to physically support her wrist. I kept my hands flat on the cool marble counter. Touching her without an operational necessity was a breach of protocol. Instead, I slid a sanitized metal prep clip across the island toward her. Your hair is a potential contaminant, I stated, my voice level. Secure it. She blinked at the clip, then up at me, a tired but genuine smile touching the corners of her mouth. She managed to pin her hair back with one hand. Good morning to you too, Gregory. What is this? She gestured to the plate. A folded omelet with spinach and Gruyere. It contains the optimal macronutrient ratio to support bone calcification and tissue repair. I placed a fork beside her plate, ensuring it was exactly parallel to the napkin. Consume all of it. Your physical therapy session is at 1,000 hours, and you require the caloric baseline. You're tracking my schedule now? I am tracking all variables that impact the operational stability of the copper spoon, I replied smoothly, picking up my clipboard. Eat. I have a vendor meeting in 10 minutes. The vendor in question was a local produce supplier named Miller, who had grown accustomed to exploiting Elodie's chaotic ordering system. When I arrived at the loading dock, Miller was already stacking crates of heirlooms and root vegetables. Where's Elodie? Miller barked, leaning against the brick wall. I don't deal with corporate suits. You are dealing with the current executive chef, I informed him, stepping up to the crates. I pulled a calibrated digital scale from my apron pocket and placed it on the steel receiving table. I did not raise my voice. I simply opened the first crate of Roma tomatoes and transferred a random sample batch to the scale. Miller scoffed. What are you doing? The invoice says 50 pounds. The invoice is a piece of paper, I replied. I checked the digital readout. This crate weighs 42.4 pounds. A visual inspection also reveals a 15% bruising rate on the bottom layer, indicating improper transport stacking. I moved to the next crate, repeating the process. 41 pounds. You are shorting this establishment by an average of 16% per delivery while charging premium local rates. Miller's face flushed. Look, buddy, the harvest was rough this week. The harvest parameters are irrelevant to contract law, I interrupted, maintaining absolute eye contact. You will adjust this invoice to reflect the actual weight, minus a 10% penalty for the damaged product, or I will terminate this vendor relationship immediately and report your weighted discrepancies to the local agricultural board. I heard the quiet squeak of rubber tires behind me. Elodie was sitting in the doorway of the loading dock, a half-eaten piece of toast in her hand. She watched in silence as Miller, grumbling under his breath, pulled out a pen and struck through the total on the invoice, rewriting the number to my exact specifications. When Miller's truck pulled away, I turned back to the clipboard, making a note of the adjusted cost. He's been doing that to me for 6 months, hasn't he? Elodie asked softly. Yes, I confirmed. Your lack of an intake scale created a vulnerability. I thought we were friends. He went to high school with my brother. She looked down at her lap, her shoulders slumping. I am failing at this. Gregory. I stopped writing. I looked at her, noting the defeat in her posture. The instinct to offer a platitude was strong, but platitudes were inefficient. You are not failing. You are injured, and your systems were uncalibrated. A flawed system can be rebuilt. I am rebuilding it. Later that afternoon, I demonstrated the new menu implementation. The staff gathered around as I broke down a whole halibut. I did not speak. I let the precision of the blade do the communicating. I utilized a flexible boning knife, finding the exact contour of the spine, separating the flesh with zero waste. I portioned the fillets into precise 6-ounce cuts, the movement mechanical, practiced, flawless. When I finished, the kitchen was entirely silent. I wiped the blade. This is the standard, I announced. Waste reduces margin. Precision ensures survival. Get to your stations. As the staff dispersed, I noticed Elodie looking at my hands. You make it look like mathematics, she noted. It is mathematics, I replied. Heat, time, and mass. It lacks soul, Gregory. Soul does not pass health inspections, Elodie. The midpoint of the timeline arrived with a catastrophic failure. It was Friday night, the beginning of the dinner rush. The ambient noise of the kitchen was at a functional 70 decibels when a sharp, mechanical grinding noise erupted from the back wall, followed by a harsh hiss. The walk-in freezer compressor had ruptured. I moved immediately, assessing the control panel. The digital readout was blinking red. The temperature was already climbing from -10 to 0. "Seal the door," I commanded the sous chef. "Do not open it again." Elodie wheeled herself forward, her eyes wide. "We have $3,000 of prime protein in there. If it thaws, we are bankrupt. We have to call emergency maintenance." "I already checked the emergency roster on my intake date," I stated, pulling my phone from my pocket. "The nearest industrial HVAC technician is 2 hours away. The thermal threshold of the current inventory will be breached in 45 minutes. She put her face in her hands. "That's it, then." "Negative." I turned to the kitchen staff. "Clear the central prep tables. Bring every available cooler from the basement. I need all ice from the front-of-house machines transferred to the back immediately." For the next 30 minutes, I orchestrated a rapid thermal transfer protocol. I created a safe, practical system, categorizing the proteins by their temperature danger zones. We packed the coolers using a precise layer of ice, a liberal application of coarse rock salt to lower the freezing point, and heavy thermal insulation blankets I kept in my vehicle for emergencies. I moved with calculated speed, ensuring cross-contamination protocols were strictly adhered to even in the panic. I designated separate zones for poultry, beef, and seafood, sealing each container with duct tape and marking the time of transfer. When the last cooler was sealed and logged, the kitchen stood breathless. I checked my watch. Inventory secured at 36 degrees. We lost 0 product. The adrenaline in the room slowly dissipated, leaving behind a bone-deep chill. The back of the kitchen was freezing due to the open coolers and the ice transfer. I stood by the stainless steel sink, covered in frost and raw meat juices, my uniform ruined. Elodie wheeled closer. She was shivering, her thin cardigan offering no protection against the sudden drop in ambient temperature. I did not ask if she was cold. I unbuttoned my heavy, double-breasted chef's jacket. Underneath, I wore a standard gray t-shirt. I stepped forward and draped the thick, insulated cotton jacket over her shoulders. The fabric was heavy, smelling of wood smoke and clean linen. She pulled the lapels together, the jacket dwarfing her frame. The physical act of covering her acted as a shield against the disaster we had just averted. The sudden stillness that settled over me was profound. "You didn't even blink," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the remaining refrigerators. "Panic is an inefficient use of oxygen," I replied, turning on the faucet to scrub my hands with antibacterial soap. She reached out, her fingers lightly touching my forearm to stop my scrubbing. The touch was brief, grounding, completely devoid of anything but profound relief. "Thank you for saving us." I looked at where her fingers had rested, then back to her exhausted face. I pressed my hand flat against my sternum, trying to quantify the sudden, illogical pressure building behind my ribs. "It is my job, Elodie." "It's more than a job to me," she confessed quietly, looking away. "My father built these prep tables. If I lose this place, I lose the last piece of him. I've been so terrified every single day since I broke my ankle." I stood there, the cold water running over my hands. I lacked the vocabulary to tell her that I would stand between her and failure until my own foundation cracked. So, I offered the only comfort I possessed. "The inventory is safe," I stated firmly. "You will not lose this place tonight." The following week brought the second obstacle, amplifying the pressure from both external and internal vectors. The hospitality group sent Thomas, my contact, to review the progress. He sat at a corner table in the empty dining room, reviewing my logs. Elodie was upstairs, resting after a grueling physical therapy session. Thomas closed the folder, tapping his pen against the leather cover. "The numbers are stabilizing, Greg. Your variance reports are flawless. But the investor board is getting impatient. They want to buy her out completely." I kept my posture rigid. "The establishment is currently hitting 85% of projected recovery goals. They don't care about the recovery goals. They think her physical limitations make her a liability," Thomas countered, leaning forward. "If you sign off on the assessment that she can't manage the physical demands of ownership, we trigger the buyout clause. You get your partnership track. You've wanted a flagship restaurant in the city for 5 years. This is the trade." Before I could formulate a strategic response, the front door swung open. Inspector Vance walked in, a clipboard under his arm. "Surprise inspection, Nelson," Vance announced, his eyes scanning the dining room. "I want to see the new compressor logs and the employee sanitation certifications." Now, Thomas stood up, adjusting his suit jacket. "I'll leave you to it, Greg. Have that assessment signed by tomorrow." He walked out, leaving me with Vance. For the next 2 hours, I engaged in a grueling bureaucratic defense. I walked Vance through every square inch of the kitchen. I produced the digitized compressor logs, demonstrating the exact minute the new unit was installed and the temperature variance curve. I handed him a perfectly indexed binder containing the ServSafe certifications for every employee. I did not flinch. I did not argue. I simply overwhelmed him with measurable reality. When Vance finally signed the passing grade on the inspection sheet, he looked almost disappointed. "You run a tight ship, Nelson." "I run a compliant ship, Inspector." By the time I returned to the upstairs flat, the sun had set. The apartment was dark, save for a single lamp in the living room. Elodie was sitting on the couch, her crutches resting on the floor. She had clearly heard Thomas in the dining room earlier. "Thomas wants to buy me out, doesn't he?" she asked quietly. "The board is considering all avenues," I replied, standing by the kitchen counter, refusing to meet her gaze. I needed time to draft a counterproposal, a legal loophole that would protect her. But I could not explain a plan that was not yet finalized. "And you're going to let them?" She didn't sound angry, just resigned. "You fixed the kitchen, Gregory. You passed the inspection. But you were always going to hand it over to them. I'm just an inefficient variable in your spreadsheet." I gripped the edge of the counter, my knuckles turning white. The urge to cross the room, to assure her that she was the only variable that mattered, pulled at me with a magnetic force. But I was trapped by my own rigid methodology. I could not offer empty promises. I only knew how to fix things with tools and rules. "I am processing the data," I said, my voice sounding hollow even to my own ears. She let out a small, tired breath. She wheeled herself into her bedroom and shut the door with a quiet click. The silence in the apartment was deafening. I pulled out my laptop and began to type. I would not sleep that night. The climax arrived on the night of the soft relaunch. The dining room was fully booked. The mayor, the local critics, and Inspector Vance were all present. It was the ultimate stress test, the metric by which my entire tenure would be judged. At 1,900 hours, the Expediter software crashed. The digital screen above the pass went black. The ticket printer fell silent. The line cooks froze. A service disaster of this magnitude meant uncoordinated firing times, cold food, and complete operational collapse. The ambient noise in the kitchen shifted from focused energy to rising panic. "We're blind, chef," the sous chef panicked, stepping back from the grill. "The system is completely offline." I stepped up to the pass. I closed my eyes for 2 seconds. I mentally mapped the prep stations, the seating chart, and the inventory par levels. I calculated the average ticket time for the current menu items. I opened my eyes. "Switch to analog. Paper tickets," I commanded. "We haven't run paper tickets in 5 years, a cook protested. "We don't know the shorthand. You will run them tonight, and you will follow my voice," I commanded, my tone cutting through the chaos with absolute authority. "I will call the flow. Station 1. You are firing 3 sea bass, 2 ribeyes. Station 2. Drop the risottos now. Station 3. Prepare the garnish setups for table 4. For 3 hours, I became the central processor of the restaurant. I managed the timing, the plating, and the quality control without a single digital aid. I relied purely on memory, pacing, and verbal commands. When a cook faltered, I stepped in, adjusting the heat on a pan, flipping a protein, and stepping back out without breaking the rhythm. I salvaged the service through sheer, unyielding command. The plates went out flawless. The dining room remained blissfully unaware of the chaos behind the swinging doors. By 2,300 hours, the last guest departed. Inspector Vance nodded to me on his way out, a silent concession of approval. At 3 a.m., The kitchen was finally scrubbed and silent. I sat on a milk crate near the back door, reviewing the manual inventory sheets. I was physically depleted, a dull ache radiating behind my eyes. The door to the dining room swung open. Elodie maneuvered her wheelchair through the gap. She had a blanket draped over her lap. She didn't speak. She just rolled over to the prep table next to me and parked. The silence stretched, not tense, but heavy with the aftermath of the battle. The software crash was a hardware fault in the main router, I stated, not looking up from my clipboard. I will have it replaced by 0800 tomorrow. Stop, she said softly. Just stop analyzing for 1 minute. I lowered my pen. She looked at the spotless kitchen, then at me. You didn't have to stay on the line. As a consultant, you could have documented the failure and walked away. You saved my restaurant. It was an operational necessity. Stop hiding behind the rulebook, she challenged gently. I looked at her. I saw the exhaustion in her frame, the fierce determination that kept her upright, the way she made this chaotic building feel like a sanctuary. I looked at the blank rows on my clipboard, the pen hovering over an empty grid, and the terrifying logic locked into place. An operational model without her in the building equaled absolute zero. I stayed up last night, I confessed, my voice sounding rough in the quiet room. I drafted a counter-proposal for the investor board. I pulled a folded document from my apron pocket and handed it to her. She opened it. Her eyes scanned the text. You restructured the management clause. You wrote yourself in as a permanent operational partner, taking a percentage of profits instead of a flat buyout, leaving me as majority owner. She looked up, her voice trembling. This kills your partnership track at the hospitality group. They'll fire you. The hospitality group is highly inefficient, I replied smoothly, though a profound stillness had settled in my chest. Their metrics for success do not align with long-term stability. This proposal creates a sustainable ecosystem. You handle the front of house and the vision. I handle the logistics, the safety codes, and the inventory. Gregory. I took the last uncomfortable task. I stepped off my milk crate, knelt down so I was at eye level with her wheelchair, and forced myself to be vulnerable. I cannot function in chaos, Elodie, but a perfectly ordered room without you in it is just a void. I want to stay. She stared at me, the tears she had been fighting all night finally spilling over. She reached out, her hands framing my face. The touch was an anchor, a stabilizer that transferred her warmth into my rigid framework. It felt like arriving at a destination I didn't know I was traveling toward. She leaned down, and our lips met. It was a soft, grounding seal on a contract no lawyer could ever draft. It was the feeling of a deadbolt locking into place, securing a home. The aftermath was methodical. The board accepted the new terms, primarily because they did not want to lose my operational data, even if it meant I was now independent. 8 weeks after my arrival, we held a small gathering on the back porch to celebrate the official finalization of the new permits. The golden hour light hit the wooden slats exactly as it had on my first day. Elodie was standing now, leaning on a single cane, the cast removed from her arm. We were co-hosting the staff and a few neighboring business owners. She laughed at something Thomas said, her smile radiant. I stood by the door, observing the flow of the party, ensuring the catering trays were maintained at safe temperatures. Elodie excused herself from the conversation and walked over to me, slipping her free hand into mine. The transfer of stability was instantaneous. The noise of the party faded into a comfortable hum. You're checking the temperature of the potato salad, aren't you? She teased softly. It is currently sitting at 41 degrees, I confirmed. It requires immediate refrigeration. She smiled, leaning her head against my shoulder. Go put it away, Gregory. Then come back to me. Understood. Closing thoughts. I learned that true stability isn't found in a perfect spreadsheet or a rigid set of rules. It is built by choosing to show up for someone, every single day, and letting their chaos soften your edges. Real love isn't about drama. It's about consistency, safety, and being the reliable anchor when the ground gives way. Please like and subscribe so we can share more stories like this. The end.